What's up everyone, welcome back to Project 1UZ. In today's video we're discussing the results of the dyno tune of the intercooled M90 Supercharged 1UZ Toyota Sora on E85. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is actually a little bit of a long-winded story, but if you're only purely interested in hearing about the results, I'll throw a link up here somewhere so you can get straight to the action and check that out. But anyway, dyno day. Well, prior to dyno day. So the last job I left myself on the Sunday before I went for the tune on the Monday was to change out the fuel injectors. And it kind of was my undoing for a little bit because this thing's currently running Toyota Supra Mark III injectors. So they're out of an MA70, so 7 MGE motor. They're 315cc and they worked really well. They were at about 85% duty cycle at maximum load. So yeah, if you're basically just running 98 and ran that 10 pound mark, they're perfect injectors for that. But obviously with E85 demands, I was going to require a bit more fuel and they weren't going to be up to the task. So I decided to buy some 550cc Bosch injectors from Golby's, and they turned up like 6 months ago, and I just threw them in the bottom drawer of the toolbox and figured that I'd get around to throwing them in. The part numbers checked out, so that's cool. So it came to the Sunday, the day before the dyno tune, pulled them out of the box, pulled my injectors out of the car, plopped them on the bench, and then realised that they weren't what I was after. The 7M injectors and the stock injectors in these are a full length injector with an 11mm O-ring in the top, and the injectors that I was sent from Golby's were 3/4 length and 14mm O-rings. So I sort of sat down for a while trying to figure out what I was going to do, and much to my disgust I decided, with no time to do anything about it, the car was just going to have to get retuned on 98 and just see how much effect the extractors and the intercooler had on the car. So I was pretty gutted with that. So we loaded the car up onto the trailer, took it there on the Monday, and we actually had a few delays there with the dyno tuner, and it basically took till after lunchtime or something that we could get started. But in that time, I'd taken the wrong injectors and everything with me, and the chance that maybe I could buy something off of him. And turned out that while I was bored, I was wading through the box of goodies, and I bought loom adapters. So standard injectors have Denso plugs, and the new injectors had Oscar plugs. And I bought these pre-terminated little harnesses from Golby's, just plug and play, and there you go. So when I opened that bag, and I probably should have opened it at home on the Sunday, I noticed that they shoved in there little injector hat adapters, and with those adapters pushed onto the top of the injectors, it turns them into full length injectors with 11mm tops on them. So that was great but frustrating. So we had a bit of time before the tune was actually going to be done, so we rolled the car into their workshop and I changed out the fuel injectors in the middle of their workshop. They were pretty cool about it, and yeah, let me have tools and stuff to get all that done, so that was pretty good. So then we thought, yes, that's awesome, we can finally get this E85 done and ready to rock. So it comes the afternoon and we load the car up on the hub dyno, go to set everything up, and for some reason we were just plummeting fuel pressure at like 2,500 RPM. And we racked our brains for ages trying to figure out what was going on. The fuel pump was a new Raceworks Bosch 44 style. It seemed to be okay, but we checked that. We checked the wiring. I had a pre-filter before the lift pump for my surge tank. We opened that up. There was a little bit of foam left in there because when I bought that tank, it was full of the foam in there to stop the sloshing, and it started to degrade very quickly. So I ended up putting that little filter in there before the lift pump to the surge tank just to catch all the debris. So I cleaned out that, still had the issue, pulled apart the main Turbo Smart fuel filter after the pressure pump, still got the issue there. The very last thing we checked, the fuel pressure regulator. It was a FPR 800 Turbo Smart regulator. It was only actually like a couple of years old and it had failed. I don't know why it failed. It's been sent off to Turbo Smart actually by the tuner so they can do some looking into it and find out what's going on there. But yeah, basically fuel pressure was supposed to be about 350 kPa, and as soon as it would get to that 2,500 RPM mark, it'd plummet down to 200 and just dropping rapidly. So can't really tune on that real well unless you're just gonna make your injectors compensate dramatically, but that's not the right thing to do. So yeah, I was lucky enough that he actually had in stock another brand new Turbo Smart reg. It was a FPR 1200, I think they are. So a bit of an upgrade. So I bought that off of him, we whacked it in the car, and then that fixed all our fuel pressure issues. So that was a massive relief to have all that sorted. So with all that done, it was finally time to get that 98 tune smashed out. So I won't leave you hanging any longer. Here's a video of the tune on 98 petrol. Yeah, so that 98 tune went really well. I was sort of guessing that it'd be around 20 horsepower increase, and it turned out being 19 horsepower, so I was pretty much on the money there. Before, the car made 294 horsepower at 326 foot-pounds of torque, and after we've ported the blower, added the extractors and installed the intercooler, we end up making 315 horsepower and 345 foot-pounds of torque. So that's an increase of 19 horsepower and 19 foot-pounds of torque. So the big question that everyone wants to know the answer to, how did that intercooler perform and what were the intake temps like? Well, without the intercooler and without the porting, when the car got dyno tuned a couple of years ago, intake temperatures were around 120 to 125 degrees, so substantially hot, and we've managed with porting the supercharger, installing the intercooler, to bring that down to 74 degrees Celsius. So that's about 50 degrees Celsius temperature drop there. So I was super stoked with that. And yeah, basically means that, yep, it's definitely worthwhile throwing an intercooler on one of these M90s, and that porting helps quite a bit too. So with all that out of the way, we'll throw that E85 tune up right now. So that was the E85 dyno. So we ended up making 340 horsepower and 363 foot-pounds of torque. So I was pretty impressed with that. It means that over the 98 tune that we just had done, we picked up another 25 horsepower and 18 foot-pounds of torque just by having that E85. So the next two clips there were the tablet that I have in the car displaying some of the outputs out of the Haltech ECU. You can see that that intake temperature there was very repeatable, so those two runs were done back to back, and both times it hit that 73, 74 degrees Celsius mark. I didn't have the coolant temperature for the intercooler on the Haltech. I've just got it on the dash beside the steering wheel, and the water doesn't seem to heat soak at all, which I was super stoked with. It seemed to stay about 30 degrees Celsius no matter what all day, running it up and down on the dyno. It never got above 30, 35, so it means that's working really well, that heat exchange in the front, so can't ask for more than that. Alright, so now it's time to compare all of the work that we've done to the dyno that we had done a couple of years ago. So we had 294 horsepower, 326 foot-pounds of torque, compared to 340 horsepower and 383 foot-pounds on the E85 with the intercooler and the extractors. That's a total increase of 46 horsepower and 37 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm pretty happy with those numbers that this thing generated. I think we've probably exhausted the capability of the M90 on the 1UZ. That's the smallest pulley that you can physically put on that blower, and it makes 10 PSI. I think it's 10.5 PSI if you want to get down to the decimals. And Basically, the big restriction with this thing now, if you wanted to go further with the M90, would be putting camshafts in it. And for a car that you're putting an M90 on, you're obviously doing it to build a car on a budget, and camshafts alone are about $2,000 Australian, let alone doing valve springs and the shims and any other headwork to go with it. So if you're going down that route of putting big cams in your car, you probably should put a bigger blower on your car. But that doesn't mean that the M90 is useless. So this thing here is really, really torquey down low. Makes great for drifting. I'm super happy with it. If you're looking to get 400-500 horsepower out of your car, then M90 is not for you, obviously. Go probably for an M122. Even the M112, you're probably not going to see drastic increases over this. You might see 400 if you're lucky. But yeah, I would recommend saying M122 if you want big numbers. So that's probably a wrap for this video. If you've enjoyed the video and you've enjoyed this series, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. What's your opinion on the M90? Do you think it's worth the time? Let us know in the comment section below. So thanks for watching, everyone, and next video, we'll see you at Matsuri. Bye.